morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. Who knew there were so many Republicans in Northern Virginia? It's great to be with you. You know, I've been feeling a little bit, well, lately I've been feeling upbeat about things, but before the elections in Virginia and Massachusetts and New Jersey, I was just, every day I would go into work and I was so depressed for the last year about all the crazy things that were going on in Washington and the insane fiscal policies that Barack Obama has launched. And so one morning, a couple months ago, I went into my office and I found this email, one of these viral emails. It probably was from you, Gabe, I don't know, but it said, the title of the emails, and I don't normally open these things up, but this was intriguing. It said, "This is bound to cheer you up," and I needed some cheering up that morning. So I did open up the email, and it said, if you're feeling really depressed about the way things are going, just always remember, at least you're not Mr. Pelosi. Gabe, that one really did cheer me up. But things have gone a lot better, haven't they, in the last couple of months? I think there is a sea change going on. And not just in Virginia, but all of these states. And I just wish that the elections, Gabe, were going to be in the next couple of weeks, because I think you'd see a total wipeout. And not just of Democrats. I think we were talking about this at breakfast, that there is a very strong anti-incumbent mood out there. People want politicians who know how to meet a payroll and run a business, and I think that's one of the big problems with Barack Obama. I think it's why his antenna don't receive the messages that we're talking about. Is that he's never really had to meet a payroll. He's never run a business. He's always been in this kind of leftist culture, and I think that's a problem not just of Barack Obama, but I would say 80 to 90% of them people are running for Congress, which is why I'm so happy to see that there are 4 or 5 of you who actually have business backgrounds who are running for Congress, because I think that would be a great addition. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes or so about my kind of take on what's happening with the economy, and then I'd love to open it up for discussion and questions. And I'm going to just start by saying that I really believe that as I look at what's happened in this country since the stock market and housing crisis that began in September of 2008, I would make the case to you that everything that Washington has done in response to the economic crisis and the financial crisis, every single piece of legislation and every new piece of regulation has been exactly the wrong thing to do. We have moved this country 180 degrees in the wrong direction, and it's going to take, unfortunately, a long time to dig out of the crisis in other words, the crisis is the response to the crisis, not the crisis itself. And we would long be out of this recession if we had done nothing. And if we'd done the right things, we'd be in much better shape. And just to sort of punctuate that point, and by the way, this isn't a partisan point. Most of the big mistakes were made under George Bush and Hank Paulson, really. I mean, there was a crisis mentality that happened. You all remember that period in September and October when we passed the $700 billion TARP plan and the bailouts of homeowners and auto companies and so on. And I think you've just had this cascading effect of one bad policy after another. And if you add it all together, what you find is that for the last, since September of 2008, we've spent almost $2 trillion trying to put out the flames of this recession. And yet, none of it has worked. I mean, it was a joke yesterday when President Obama gave his press conference talking about what a great success the stimulus bill. I mean, it's laughable to say that. I mean, we've lost 3 million jobs since he put that stimulus bill into place. And to, again, put this into context, imagine that it were September, October of 2008, and instead of launching the TARP program, and which led to the stimulus and Cash for Clunkers and all these other programs, imagine if George W. Bush had simply said, this is a great financial crisis we are in, and we are going to suspend the personal and corporate income tax for a year until this crisis is over. By the way, if we had done that, it would have been cheaper to do that, to suspend the personal and corporate income tax for every business and worker in America, than to do all of these other crazy programs we've done. Now, I would submit to you, if we had told every business, man and woman in America, they don't have to pay income tax on their earnings, and if we told every worker, you don't have to pay income tax on your earnings, we wouldn't have a 10% unemployment rate today. We'd have 6% unemployment. We'd have 5 million more jobs if we had done that. And that's the real crisis. We as economists like to talk about opportunity cost. What could we have done with the money? And that would have been a much higher return. And what I want to talk about for just a few minutes then is what has worked and what hasn't worked in our country's last 40 or 50 years in terms of economic policies that have stimulated the economy and policies that haven't. Because I think the best way of kind of, well, you're all probably here tomorrow, this morning, because you're interested in what the economy is going to look like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. I don't have a clue. I don't think any, this is one thing, I don't think most economists have any clue what the economy is going to look like 6 months from now. And I think the best we can do in terms of making predictions is just sort of look at the past and see what's worked in the past. So if you'll bear with me, would you mind just, oh, this is the word. Whoops. How do I do this? Just hit the, just press button. Which one?
This thing is not a teleprompter.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you just, let's see, I'm not sure what it is.
Just hit page down. Okay, so some of you may have seen this chart before. I used it all in my presentation, but really it encapsulates what's happened with the U.S. economy over the last 50 years. It's just the U.S. stock market. This is the S&P 500 over the last 50 years, from 1960 to 2009. It's a little out of date because it doesn't capture the increase in the market that happened. It started in the spring of 2009. But the point of this chart, the black chart is just the S&P 500, and the blue line below that is the S&P 500. But all I've done here is I've inflation adjusted the returns. So you all, most of you in this room are investors, not just businessmen and women. And so when you make an investment, hopefully you know this, when you make your investment, you're interested in your after inflation, not your before inflation rate of return. You're interested in your real rate of return. And to just make a long story short, what you can see here, you see the V shape of that blue line. Basically what that's saying is that from around the late 1960s through 1981, America experienced the worst bear market in stocks and assets. And by the way, I'm using the stock market here as just a proxy for the economy in general. Almost all the statistics have the same shape. And so just to give you a sense of how terrible that period was, over that 15-year period from 1967 to 1981, stocks adjusted for inflation lost 52% of their value. That's a pretty amazing statistic, isn't it? A 15-year period where the stock market lost half of its value. One of the things that Barack Obama says all the time, and that the press always parrots, that is so wrong, and so demonstrably wrong, is when they say Barack Obama inherited the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, right? You've all heard that said 10 times a day for the last 2 years. Now, there's no question Barack Obama did inherit a great economic crisis, but he did not inherit an economic crisis like Ronald Reagan inherited in 1981, because what Reagan inherited was a 15-year economic crisis. What Barack Obama inherited was a 1-year crisis. And so, you can see here that the turning point happens with the election of Reagan, right? And you can see once Reaganomics is put into effect, and we have a radical change in the direction of our economic policy, on tax policy, on trade policy, on fiscal policy, welfare policy, and so on. You can see this, and of course monetary policy, because of course one of the reasons you saw the big declines in stocks in the 70s was the great inflation of the 70s under Jimmy Carter. And you can see here that from now, if you look at this chart, then looking at the black line, from 1981 through 2007, that period from 81 to 2007, a 26-year period, I would submit to you is the greatest period of prosperity in the history of civilization. No country has created as much wealth as the United States did in the last 26 years. It's an incredibly underappreciated boom. And I would make the case it was just, we had Reagan, Bush, Clinton. I'm a big admirer of, I know this is a Republican audience, but I think once you had Clinton and a Republican Congress, look at what happened to the stock market. You had capital gains tax cuts, a balanced budget, and fiscal conservatism during those years. And this was an incredible boom. I mean, just to put this in perspective, some of you may think, well, this wasn't really that great a period of wealth. If you think about it, in 1981, when Reagan became president, the net worth of the country, the value of all American assets, was estimated at about $16 trillion. And by the way, this is net worth, so it's all assets minus liabilities of every American company, every American individual. It's sort of like US Inc. was worth $16 trillion. By 2007, US Inc. wasn't worth $16 trillion, it was worth 60.